Okay, this is how your Thursday is going to look like from the business world. This is Business Morning, Thursday, the 21st of September. I am Bosun number 5. Welcome our viewers here in Nigeria and around the world. Let's get started. No retreat, no surrender. Nigeria's government, the Minister of State for Aviation, Hadi Sirika, speaking on behalf of the Buhari's administration, says there's no going back on the approval of the cabinet for the concessions of the Abuja, Lagos, Kano, and Port Harcourt airports, first okayed by President Buhari way back in 2015. That's what Mr. Sirika says yesterday, and he went on to say that the concession will be transparently done with the active participation of workers, both in the delivery and the steering committees, to drive this process. He says that the workers who are agitated over the last few days will being considered and being held meetings with to be part of the process, but there will be no going back on the concessioning of those 4 airports. Then he says there will be other concessions of other airports coming up when those ones are done. The junior minister for aviation says the previous experiences was a learning curve for the government on how to do it better this time around. And he went on to say that the policy of the government is that we cannot fund aviation infrastructure through public budgets, so the money is not there. He went on to say that we intend to get the private sector to come and put in their money. Hadi Sirika says President Buhari has therefore approved 45 billion naira as severance package for the former workers of the liquidated Nigerian Airways. Meantime, the United Labour Congress has called off their 3-day strike after a meeting on Monday and Tuesday, with the Labour and Employment Minister, Mr. Chris Ngige. So we can put that behind us and then move on to one of the hotly talked about story in town since the week started. That's the size of debt of the current administration. So let's look at the borrowing book of this administration from federal and state levels. Let's give you a very quick rundown of where we are at the moment. The local and foreign debts of the Nigerian government since 2017 started has gone up 31.9%. So we're now at $15.1 billion at the end of June. That's the overarching, that's the total picture. The federal government's external debt has gone up 42% since 2017 started. That's the first 6 months picture you're looking at there. Then for the state government, the external debt, they've ratcheted up, has gone up 10.4% to $3.9 billion US dollars. So that's about $4 billion. If you add that to the $15 billion borrowing by the federal government, that gives you close to $20 billion US dollars that this administration has borrowed. Then you look at the locally, how much are we borrowing? In terms of the domestic debt, that had gone up 8.8% to a record 12 trillion naira as of June. As at yesterday, that's about the size of the entire Nigerian stock market value. 12 trillion is what the Buhari's administration is currently sitting on as domestic debt. Now, only 2 states out of the 36 state governments have raised local debt so far in 2017, and of course we know why. The federal government has been supporting the state governments for the last 2 years or so with various amounts of monies, what you call a stimulus package for them to remain afloat. Now, if you break it down, and you can see the percentage or the ratio, that's the ratio, sorry, not the percentage, ratio of the local debt to foreign debt of the current administration. Local debt, 72%, foreign debt, 28% as at the end of June 2017. Now, the external debt as a ratio of the GDP of Nigeria as at the first 6 months of this year was 14%. What's the average? for emerging markets is about 30%. If we include ourselves among emerging markets, we are a frontier market, really. We are not an emerging market. But if you look at emerging markets ratio, you're looking at countries like Brazil, South Africa, and a few others. The average of debt to GDP was 30%. Nigeria is 14%, so we're still below the emerging markets average. And that's where some folks believe that our debt is still sustainable. That is the Buhari's administration's debt, both inherited and current, are still sustainable below the emerging markets average. Let's leave that and step into what is going to be the biggest stories next week already. Days ahead of the MPC monetary policy meeting, you're going to see a lot of comments. So we're counting down to the monetary policy committee meeting Monday and Tuesday, 25 and 26. Yesterday, the central bank published comments of the MPC members. 8 of them were at the meeting in July. 2 of them voted for a cut in monetary policy rate. 6 of the members says the rate at 14% should be left unchanged. So some of these comments were published yesterday, and part of what has been revealed in their comments, the decisions, then we come to what was read to everyone as a communique, was that some of the MPC members at the July meeting believed that, showed that 4 commercial banks, not named, are trading below the minimum liquidity ratio. That's the story out since yesterday. And that a stress test showed that the capital adequacy ratio, that's what the CAR stands for, worsens to 11.5% across the industry in June in June from April, 12.81% in April, 12.81%, I beg your pardon, a little bit of a mix-up there. It worsens to 12.81% in June from 11.51% in the month of April. So the figure for June was 12.81%. The figure for April was 11.51% in terms of industry capital adequacy ratios.